Hello and welcome to...
Go ahead.
After you.
No, you go ahead. You never get to start.
You do it first. It's your channel.
It's our channel. Hello and welcome
to Film Bouillabaisse. Sorry, I won't do it again.
Let's do it together.
No, you go ahead. I won't do it again.
Hello and welcome
to Film Bouillabaisse.
Edition of Little Women. And just like all women are being interrupted, I'm being interrupted by my always co-host.
Hello, Logan Albright here.
And we're here to talk about the Louisa May Alcott adapted film Little Women, this time directed by Greta Gerwig, who you may know from Mumblecore and from directing Lady Bird a couple of years ago, starring Saoirse Ronan, who plays Jo March in this film. So there are 3 other movie iterations of this film, the most recent one being in 1994, which a lot of us very young Gen Xers grew up with as being a part of our adolescence. And me and you actually watched that last Thanksgiving.
We sure did, and it was a good one.
So give us just a little bit of a summary about Little Women in general, the source material.
So Little Women is a book by Louisa May Alcott written in the 19th century. It takes place during the Civil War, and it's basically a coming-of-age story of these 4 daughters, Meg, Beth, Jo, and Amy, who grow up and have their trials and tribulations and have to figure out what to do with their lives. I think Jo is sort of the main character. She's sort of the tomboy, disobedient one who doesn't want to be ladylike and who wants to be a writer. But they all have kind of equal weight in the book. And it's a very old-fashioned slice of life sort of book. There's not a lot of drama in it. It's sort of just these kids growing up and learning about their lives. It's nice. It's a nice, wholesome book.
It really is, but not cloying. It's never cloying. Now, there are 4 girls, and the oldest is played here by Emma Watson. It was supposed to be Emma Stone who dropped out. I think Emma Watson was pitch perfect for this. Saoirse Ronan is Jo, as I mentioned, and when she was shooting Lady Bird with Greta Gerwig, she said, if you're doing Little Women, I have to be Jo. And then Amy is Florence Pugh, who has had a brilliant year. She was in Lady Macbeth, she was in Midsummer, and she's got some big films coming out as well. And she plays Amy both as a young Amy and as an adult. So she was about 22 when she filmed this movie.
Yeah, overall I think the casting was pretty good. I love Hermione. She's great in everything. I thought Saoirse Ronan was a really good Jo, because the problem with Jo's in the past is that they tend to cast she's sort of the lead character, so they tend to cast these beautiful young starlets like Winona Ryder in the 1994 adaptation. And a big part of Jo's characteristics in the book is that she's not the pretty one. She's kind of the boyish one who doesn't dress up nice and is not that good looking, and her sisters make fun of her for not being the pretty one, and it rings so false when you have them saying, oh, Jo, you cut your hair, the only thing beautiful about you, when it's Winona Ryder. You don't buy it. And I thought Saoirse Ronan, not ugly by any stretch of the imagination, but a little bit more plain and less glamorous than previous Jo's have been in adaptations, so I thought she was great for that.
Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about Laurie. Laurie is their neighbor who befriends them, befriends all 4 of the March girls, honestly. He lives with his grandfather, and he's a little bit of a dandy. He has a particularly close relationship with Jo. Here he is played by Timothée Chalamet. You saw him in Call Me By Your Name and Beautiful Boy starring Steve Carell. So he's a really good Laurie, I think. It's very different than the one Christian Bale did in 1994, but I thought it hit all the marks.
I liked him. I thought he played the role young. I mean, he felt younger and a little bit more immature than some of the other people who played the role, but it worked for me. I was okay with it. I didn't like him and Amy too much, because I think the woman who played Amy, whose name I'm forgetting, is I thought she did a great job. But based on the description of Amy in the book as the youngest one and kind of the bratty one, I thought she came across as too mature, especially when she was playing the young Amy. The young Amy is supposed to be 10 years old, and she's playing it as a 22-year-old. It really she's got kind of a deep voice as well, and I had a hard time buying her as that youngest sister. She seemed older than a lot of the other sisters a lot of the time. But I liked Timothée Chalamet. I thought he was good.
Yeah, Florence Pugh brings a lot to this role. She has that kind of deep husky voice. And some of the people I saw this film with, they actually thought that Beth was the youngest sister, so I get that. But if you can kind of embrace it, it's great.
Yeah, she was good. The other casting note I want to make is like 2/3 of the way through the movie, you see Bob Odenkirk as the father who's come back from the Civil War. And I love Bob Odenkirk. I'm a huge fan of him. I've been following his career for the last like 15 years. And I think of him as a comedy actor, and it's so hard for me to take him seriously in a movie like this. I laugh every time I see him on screen because he's so funny, even though he's playing a serious role. So I don't know if he's really the right person to cast in a movie like this, given his pedigree, because he used to be in a sketch show where he did a lot of like Civil War sketches and stuff. So I see him in that uniform, it conjures that in my mind, and it makes me think he's doing a joke.
Something had gone awry, or afoul, or askew.
I loved him. You have his wife, Marmee, being the very present maternal figure who helps the girls learn their Christian path and duties. And then as Aunt March, you have the incomparable Meryl Streep knocking it out of the park. Most folks I've heard from said they could have done with a little bit more Meryl in this film just because she's so good.
It's nice to see Meryl Streep not doing a impression, because I feel like a lot of these older stately actors like Meryl Streep or Tom Hanks, like all they're doing now is they're doing impersonations of famous people. Like Tom Hanks is doing Mr. Rogers, and she's doing the Iron Lady or Florence Foster Jenkins or things like that. So playing an actual role was nice for her. And then, yeah, Marmee is played by Laura Dern, who's everywhere these days, but who I love because I'm a huge David Lynch fan, and she's in all the David Lynch movies. And I love Laura Dern, so it's nice to see her in this as well.
Yes, and if you mostly know her recently from Little Big Lies, this is such a turn for her, and you will eat it up. Okay, so let's chat a little bit about the character of Amy. She's kind of grown up in Joe's shadow. They're both artists. Joe's the writer, Amy likes to paint, and she wants to become basically the world's most awesome painter. But Amy is kind of hard to like. I found her more likable in this version than in other versions, but I always have had the Amy problem.
Well, the reason Amy is more likable in this version is because they made a concerted effort to downplay a lot of the drama in the book. And like I said, the book doesn't have a ton of drama to begin with, but the biggest moments in the book are like really earth-shattering moments for the characters. There's the scene, and this may be a spoiler at this point, so if you want to turn it off, go ahead. But there's a scene where Amy is angry at Joe, and she burns Joe's novel manuscript that she's been working on for months. That in the book is cataclysmic, and it makes you just despise Amy and hate her. They kind of brush past it in the movie. A lot of the big drama points. There's also the thing at school with the limes was a big deal in the book. They brushed past it in the movie, and I feel like they were trying to represent these conflicts as kind of youthful, childish foibles that don't really matter. Whereas when you are a child, they seem like the biggest thing in the world. So that was a different take on those kind of plot points in the movie. And so I think that not having that big drama moment where Amy is ruining the thing that's most beautiful to Joe and most important to her, it makes you able to like her a little bit more. Where me and everyone else I know who's read the book has never been able to get past that incident in the book, and we hated Amy forever because of that.
I can't get past her burning the manuscript, and that's very hard for me. So I have, and we'll have a little banner at the top, Alison's top 3 characters, awful characters, that are better than Amy March. Number 3, Lord Voldemort from Harry Potter. Number 2, Saruman from Lord of the Rings.
I feel where Saruman was coming from. I always kind of liked him.
But still, he's more likable than Amy March.
Christopher Lee, hard not to like him.
And number 1, Joffrey Baratheon from all those Game of Thrones books.
I haven't read those.
I haven't either, but I've seen the show. And that's Alison's top 3 literary characters that are better than Amy March.
Hooray! Now, I think we need to take a moment to talk about the editing in this movie.
Yes, I was going to mention that.
Because you were basically okay with it. I had more of a problem with it. The way that this movie tells the story is that it jumps back and forth between late period March sisters and early period March sisters. So like it starts off with the late period, and then it goes 7 years earlier and goes back, and it continually jumps back and forth throughout the course of the movie. And I feel like maybe one of the reasons they chose to do this is that everybody kind of knows the story by now. Like anyone who's going to go see this movie pretty much knows what Little Women's about. So they're trying to make the story more interesting by chopping it up that way. but I didn't think it added anything to the story, and I thought it was confusing, and I thought it undercut a lot of the drama of what was going on because you see what's going to happen before it happens. And I really had a problem with it. I thought it weakened all the drama of the story, and I thought it made it harder to follow because most of the characters look pretty similar in the 7-year difference where it cuts back and forth. And so you're not really given, apart from that first time when you're shown 7 years earlier, you're not given a marker to say this is present time, this is past time. You're just supposed to follow it out based on context. And I thought if you didn't know the story already, it would have been hard to follow.
I think it needs more cats. I liked the storytelling a lot. I didn't find it hard to follow what was going on, but when I went into the bathroom afterward, there was women in there that maybe weren't familiar with the source material, and they found it very hard to follow it along, and they couldn't tell the sisters apart. Now, the sisters in this movie all have different colored hair, so I found, I mean, even if I didn't know it, don't let that put you off. You'll be able to tell just from the actress's hair, even if you're not familiar with the actresses.
Yeah, I didn't have a hard time telling the sisters apart. Although I guess there's a lot of characters. If you're not familiar with them, you got to figure out who all these people are. I mean, we both had the advantage of going in knowing who all the characters are, so it's hard for me to put myself in the shoes of someone who didn't. But yeah, I think the plot would have been tricky, and I don't think that would have helped with the knowing who's who. Is the fact that you basically have 8 characters now to keep track of instead of 4 because you have past and future Joe and Amy and Meg and Beth.
Yes, and we had pretty much recently seen the other film. It had been only about 13 months since I had seen the 1994 version. There was a lot of bawling and sobbing in the movie theater that I was in. A lot of people ugly crying. What about your theater?
I didn't notice anyone. Again, I felt like the big tearjerker moment in the book was sort of undercut by the fact that they telegraph it by jumping back and forth in time.
I was a little worried when this came out. I'm like, do we really need another Little Women film? We have the Katharine Hepburn version that's great, and we have the Winona Ryder version, which is also great, and then there's another version.
The other version is like set in present day, isn't it?
Yeah, and it came out last year, and it was reviewed quite horribly. Just as a little note here, there's a little coda at the end of this film that's not from the books, and it helps actually the story end on a note that I think is more true to Jo March's character and her integrity and what she thought was important, and a little bit of that may have been culled from Louisa May Alcott's real life, and I think that was neat.
As you know, I'm a stickler for literary authenticity and adhering to the source material, but I really liked this edition because I never bought it. I never bought The Way Little Women Ends and as a book. I thought it felt inauthentic. It didn't feel true to the characters. And so having this little alternate interpretation made it feel more true to the characters to me. So I liked it that they put that in.
All right. Well, I think that's a wrap. Thanks for reviewing Little Women with me.
Thank you for letting me review Little Women with you.
As always, thanks for keeping it real. Keep on clapping. Clapboard. For all the cats here at Film Bouillabaisse, I'm Alison Parker.
I'm Logan Albright. Good night.
See you next time.